Okay, we have our data entered in the X data column and the Y data column, and we just have the rows numbered from 1 to 20. I'm going to start with the average down there in the cell that I have tapped on. That's going to be the average of the X data. So I double tap, and of course I want a formula, so I'm going to press equals and functions, and I'm going to select all and scroll down to average. And now it's looking for the average of a certain set of data. So I'm going to tap above the cell and drag that little blue dot up so that I have the average of that whole column, B2 to B21. We'll look at the end as to why I'm including some extra blank locations. Green check mark. Now that I have that, I want to do the same thing for the Y data, so instead of setting up the formula, I'm going to tap that cell one time, and I'm going to select fill, and I'm going to grab the two bars on the right side of it and drag it just one to the right, and that will give me the average of the Y data. I'm now going up to the top, and I want the X deviation. Well, the X deviation would be the value of X minus the average. Alright, so tap on that cell to get the formula, double tap, equals to get a formula. Alright, and it's going to be squared, so I'm going to start with the parentheses. I'm going to tap on the 2 in the X data, and I'm now going to subtract. And now I have to find that location where the average was. Tap on that. Now, I don't want this to change as I drag it down. So I tap on the little triangle in my formula, and I need to preserve everything. Didn't quite get it. There we go. Got to tap it so I get all of those. So now it's going to be an absolute cell reference to that cell. Hit my check mark, and now I'm going to drag that down. So I tap on it, fill, grab the two bars at the bottom, and I'm only going to drag it down as far as the data. Alright, and so I now have all of the X deviations squared. Alright, and notice when I double check my formula, I made an error there, so I have to go back and edit that formula. Tap out, tap back in. I forgot to square the parentheses, so I'm going back to my formula, and I'm going to go caret 2. Alright, and now it is the deviation squared. Alright, now I'm going to tap one time again, hit fill, and now I'm going to drag it down, and I just corrected my error. I need to do the same thing for my Y deviation. Alright, so I'm going to tap in that cell, double tap to get a formula going, equal sign. Alright, I'm going to start with the parentheses. I'm going to tap the first Y data, which is 28. I'm going to subtract the average of the Y's, which is down here, and I need to make that absolute, so I hit the little triangle. I'm going to preserve that. Got to do it again. There we go. Preserve that. And it seems to hang up a little bit with your visible area when you're in landscape mode. Alright. I now need to tap out of that. I need to close my parentheses. Yep. If I look at it, I don't have it preserved correctly. Now, Alright, so I tap out of that, and now I caret 2 to square it. Then hit undo, and tap behind the parentheses, caret 2. Don't be afraid to use your undo button. It changed colors there. That was no big issue. It's still an absolute cell reference. Alright, green check mark because that's what we want. Tap it once, fill, and we're going to drag it down only as far as the data goes. Alright, next cell over. We're going to need a formula here. It's going to be the x deviation times the y deviation. So double tap, start with an equal sign. Alright, so it's a product of two deviations. I'm going to need a parentheses times another parentheses. So I'm starting with the parentheses, and the x deviation would be the first x value minus the deviation is the value minus the average. I need to make this all preserved, so it's an absolute cell reference. Didn't quite get it, I can see that. Okay, and now it's preserved all around, and tap out of it, close my parentheses, times, open another parentheses for the y deviation. So the y deviation is the 28 minus the average of the y's, minus the average of the y's, and I need to make that an absolute cell reference. It seems like I have to go in and twice so I get the whole thing. You can see that it's an absolute cell reference because there's a dollar sign in front of the C and a dollar sign in front of the row number, and that's all. I need to now close that parentheses, so I tap out of that location, close my parentheses, and I think I now have it correct. Green check mark. Going to tap on that once, fill down, and again fill it only down as far as the data goes. Alright. So now we're going to start doing some sums of these three columns. The sum is a pretty quick function because it's built into the keypad. So I'm tapping down here, double tap to edit it, and press equals. And notice that underneath the number 1, the sum comes in, and it pretty much decides that you're going to sum everything above it. And we want that in case we add data, and green check mark that. We want the same thing for the next two cells to the right, so I'm going to tap it once, hit fill, and drag it across two more locations. We're now ready to complete the correlation formula, which I'm going to simply put in this cell. And an equal sign. And I'm going to tap on the y deviation. I'm sorry, the x deviation times the y deviation. That's my numerator. I'm going to divide that by the square root. So I have to go to my functions and pick all and scroll down to square root. There it is. And the square root of basically a product. So I'm going to open a parentheses, and it's going to be the x deviation squared times the y deviations squared, their sums. Close my parentheses, and it looks like I'm good to go. And there is my correlation coefficient. Put some text in here. All right. Now, one of the advantages of what I did is if I decide to add some additional data or change some data, if I, for example, I'm going to put a couple more numbers in here, 22 and 52, and let's go 42 and 63, just to add two more pieces of data or edit data. Now what I can do is simply drag the fills, right, down two more levels, and everything is now recalculated for me, right? Because the sums columns and the averages are taking everything down to row 20, right?